Revelation 17 details an image of a prostitute riding a multi-headed monster up out of the water. She's fornicated with the kings of the earth. People from every tribe, nation, and language have gotten drunk on her immorality. And she's dressed in scarlet red, purple, and gold, decked out in diamonds and pearls. She is the picture of seductive indulgence and excess. But the cup that she's offering is, well, we'll get to that. The image that the author, John, paints in Revelation 17 is dripping with sexual temptation, which might lead you to believe that that's what this whole passage is about, condemnation of sexual immorality. But that doesn't even come close to what we're talking about here. When I learned what this was actually about, I had to make this video and share it with you because there is so much floating out there on the internet and from pulpits that misses the real point and meaning here. And when you see it, you're never going to unsee it. In fact, you might start seeing the real thing absolutely everywhere. But first, hey, my name is Corey and I'm the pastor here at Redeemer Online. And if you've ever wondered about the weird and wild imagery in the book of Revelation, but you're weary of the conspiracy theory peddling, end times predicting enthusiasts, I've created a free 3-part miniseries designed to help you understand what Revelation meant to its original readers and what, if anything, it might mean for you and me. And if you're interested in that, just throw a wave emoji in the comments and I'll get you the link. Okay, so what is this sexually charged picture of Babylon the prostitute all about? Well, most people think it's either a wild end time prophecy or that it's really all about sexual immorality, and both of those miss the point entirely. There's not a future day coming when a literal prostitute dressed in purple and gold is going to ride out of the sea on a red monster. This, like all of Revelation, is symbolic. It's apocalyptic literature, meaning it's specifically designed to pull back the curtain on the original reader's present reality, not predict the future. So let's look at the passage specifically so that we can get some clarity around what this meant. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth have committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." What? Why? Why are you going to show John that? Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. All right. So who is this prostitute? Well, she's not actually a person. She's named after one of the world's greatest empires, Babylon, but in particular within the collective imagination of John, the author, and his audience who has their ethnic and religious roots firmly planted in the history of Israel. Babylon is a particularly nefarious character and foe. But let's dig in for some context. Deep within Israel's origin story is a narrative about humanity's original collective move to defy God's will. The story goes that God instructed humanity to spread out, to fill the earth and subdue it. But as people made their way east, beyond the Euphrates, in the plains of Shinar, which eventually became known as Babylonia, they got together and decided that they would defy God's instruction. Instead of spreading across the land and filling the earth, they would stay put and build up. And they'd build this tower that would make a name for themselves rather than fulfill the mandate they received from God. If you're familiar with the story, you know that God confused their language so that they'd give up on the project. But the truth is, the idea of building something that would make a name for themselves stuck. Eventually, around 626 BCE, Babylon would become an incredibly powerful and opulent empire. Its architectural spectacles drew the admiration of the ancient world, and as a large, sprawling city, the largest of its era, Babylon was a religious and cultural trade hub, a cosmopolitan metropolis, attracting people from all over the ancient world. Citizens saw their Babylon as a sort of earthly paradise, the world's center and embodiment of cosmic harmony, a kind of heaven on earth. Its religious devotion to the Babylonian gods were interwoven with every aspect of Babylonian culture and life. They saw their very existence as a gift from Marduk, their main god. And the empire's wealth, which was derived from vast conquests and trade, meant that plenty of jewelry, textiles, fine pottery, and exotic goods flowed in and through this city. Because of all of that, Babylon became a magnet for pleasure, luxury, and urban sophistication. But in the mind of John, Babylon was the paradigm of empire, of indulgence, conquest, and religious idolatry. Babylon was responsible for conquering his ancestors and dragging a bunch of them off into exile. It was the paradigm of appearance over substance. Sure, it looked seductively glamorous, but underneath it was an engine of injustice, idolatry, and dehumanization. And John and his readers, they knew all too well what it was like to become the victim of various versions of Babylon. Maybe seduced by glamour, but then eventually forced into gory submission. That's what happens to the kings of the earth, according to the vision. They fornicated with her, meaning they too were seduced by the promise of wealth and power and prestige and opulence and security, but in return, they just got trapped and dominated. So who is this prostitute riding the beast? She is the very essence and idea of empire itself, a seductively attractive prospect that in turn ends up being a cup filled with filth, the offer of a glamour that is secretly produced by an unjust engine of gore and conquest. Well, what about that beast that she's riding? What's the deal with that? Well, the good news is that while John is marveling at this woman riding on the beast, shocked at what he's seeing, the angel who's showing it to him goes right ahead and explains it. Although it's still cryptic. It is revelation after all. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." Great, looking forward to the explanation. The beast, which you saw, once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. Now, we talked about this actually in a previous video, but one interpretation here is that this is actually a reference to the commonly held belief that the Emperor Nero hadn't actually died, or that if he did die, he would be resurrected and return to rule Rome once again. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. Okay, let's get into the specifics of the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. Well, believe it or not, the ancient city of Rome was formed and flanked by the river to the west and 7 hills to the north, south, and east. So this woman, who, remember, represents the very idea of empire, is sitting where? Basically in the ancient city of Rome. Now, in case the illustration wasn't clear enough, the angel goes on. They, that is the 7 heads, are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast, who once was and now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. Thanks for clearing that up, Angel. Hold on. Look, according to some estimations, you can actually map these onto the emperors of Rome, beginning with Augustus, quite neatly. The first 5 who have fallen are the emperors who have gone before Nero: Augustus, Gaius, Claudius, and then Nero as well. And then after Nero comes Galba, and then after him, Otho, although Otho doesn't last very long. So that would put John's writing here in the late 60s in the first century during the reign of Galba, and he's predicting that Otho's going to be the 7th short-lived king, and then the 8th, who once was and now is not, but is going to come again, and is the 8th, who's also one of the 7, would be the prediction of Nero's return, being the 8th, who was the part of the original 7. Is your head spinning yet? Okay, look, that's not necessarily what we're meant to see. Maybe it is, but remember, in apocalyptic literature, 7 is the number of completion. And so the idea could also be that the beast is the illusion of a complete and perfect kingdom. Remember, empire is all about opulence, seduction, wealth, and prosperity, while being undergirded by injustice, conquest, and dehumanization from John, the author's perspective. And eventually, as the symbolic 8th ruler shows, this perfect kingdom isn't actually going to be all that perfect. It'll be led to destruction. So, is the seductress riding Rome? Yes. Specifically mapped onto the rulers? Not necessarily. It is symbolic. And part of why scholars think so is because the 10 horns explanation doesn't refer to any specific kings or emperors. It just seems to be lesser rulers. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. So this seems to be a representation of all those who will give over their authority for the promise of everything that empire offers. These are those who seek their own taste of some of that power and wealth and opulence and notoriety, flirting and fornicating with empire in hopes that she will offer those goods to them. And they're even willing to wage war against the Lamb in hopes of winning her love. But not forever. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They'll bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire, for God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." You see, she doesn't just sit in Rome. Aspiration for empire resides in the hearts of every people group, every multitude, every nation, every language. But inevitably, those who have sold themselves out for her will turn on her. They'll hate her. They'll tire of her over-promising and under-delivering. Like every empire before Rome, and so many that will come after it, kings and princes from the far-flung corners of the empire will eventually tire of Lady Rome sucking up all the wealth and glory and resources. They will turn on her, and they'll strip her and eat her flesh and burn her with fire, according to the vision. What's kind of wild here is that in some ways, the beast, which is an enemy of God's people, John's readers, is also going to be an instrument of God's justice in the end. And the empire will collapse under its own violent ways. It'll eat itself alive. Man, this is a wild vision, right? But what does it mean? Well, in some ways, it's a dream within a dream. Revelation is a much larger vision or dream, right? Especially these chapters where we've been talking about the dragon and the beast of the sea and the beast on land. John has been revealing that the dragon, his apocalyptic representation of evil or the devil or Satan, if you will, that dragon is operating in opposition to God and his people through the beast of the sea, which happens to be the empire of Rome. And also through the false prophet, the beast on land, which is the imperial religious cult that demanded worship of the Roman emperor and empire itself. This vision then of the woman is like a vision within the vision, looking specifically at the concept of empire itself, a seductive power that promises wealth, security, power, and prestige. You see, John's pointing out for his readers that what's going on in their reality with Rome isn't an isolated incident. It's just their version of Babylon. It's a recurring spiritual reality that happened to their religious ancestors, is happening to them, and will happen again in the future. Babylon has always been there in the hearts and minds of all cultures and peoples. And to John's readers, they have always been victims of that prostitute and beast. They were victims of Egypt, of Assyria, of Babylon, of Persia, and eventually now of Rome. Each one of those seductive empires promised prosperity, while at the same time were operated by an engine of injustice, tempting people everywhere, but eventually resulting in destruction. And what John wants his readers to know is that God's will is the ultimate destruction of these dehumanizing empires that crush his people. This passage is judgment, not just on individuals, but on systems of oppression. Empires will always fall because they are self-destructive, but it will also be God's judgment on them. This vision of the seductress riding a beast was a message of hope to John's first readers. And I think it can be to us too. Whatever your beast, know that God will deal with it. Every empire will eventually crumble under the weight of its own seductive but ultimately unfulfilling promises. They always have. They always will. Now, why does this matter to you and me? I mean, we don't live in Rome, right? We're not being crushed by a seductive empire that promises glitz and gold while actually being operated by a dehumanizing, unjust engine and system. Maybe not. I mean, on one level, I think there's a welcome promise here. Whatever system of injustice is crushing you right now, know that God sees and God will bring justice. Know that evil will eventually collapse under its own weight in one way or another. And on another level, I think it opens a worthy discussion and reflection. To use the vivid imagery of John's vision, I wonder, where do you find yourself tempted to, fornicate with empires of injustice? Where are you drawn in by promises of opulence and power or notoriety that are actually fueled by engines of injustice? And on the flip side, what do you think it looks like for you to resist Babylon? I'd love to know what you think. Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments or reflect on them with the people you're watching this video with. And as always, remember, this is Redeemer Online, and it's my mission to help you understand and practice the Christian faith regardless of your church attendance. And if that's something you're interested in, hit the subscribe button. We've actually got a lot going on right now to support your faith journey. We've got a live stream every Monday where we practice the faith together, prayer and reflection and scripture reading. We've got daily prayer prompts and scripture reflections that we put out on social media. And we also have videos like this one every single weekend to help you better understand and practice the faith. So if you don't want to miss out on any of that we've got going on, join the email list using the link in the description. And if you're looking for more personalized, customized help when it comes to your faith journey, I'd be happy to connect with you one-on-one, completely free. Just book a time with me using the link in the description below. I'd love to sit down with you and help you gain some clarity and direction when it comes to your spiritual life. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.